What's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to give you some tips on how to jump your RC car so you can build some confidence and most importantly break less parts. Check it out. So as many of you know, this is not a skill that usually comes naturally. It takes a lot of practice and a lot of technique to get it down to where you're landing pretty well on most jumps. Even still, when you get really good at it, you're still going to break, you're still going to land hard, and that's just a part of the game. But hopefully some of these techniques can help you do it a little bit less. I'm also going to take the trucks out and give them some jumps to show you what I mean on some of the techniques and just demonstrate how it looks. So there's many kinds of jumps out there, and those surface types and conditions play a big role in how this goes. Dirt is a common one. There's also grass jumps. There's pavement onto a ramp.
There you go.
Boom. There's even snow jumps. But whatever you choose, you've got to practice and sort of get the feel of that surface before you go sending it. Dirt jumps can be more complicated because the truck is often sliding around in the dirt depending on the surface. That affects another point, which is approach angle. This can be tricky at first to get the right lineup on the jump. It also matters where you stand, and I'll show you that in a bit. But approaching the jump square on is going to be your best friend. You want to hit it straight. Any angle that you have when you hit the jump is going to send the truck kind of diagonal or sideways in the air and make it much harder to land. The ultimate goal when jumping is to land as flat as possible. If you can hear that chassis slap, wow, that is the best.
Perfect.
On all four wheels if possible. That's often not easy. Close as you can to getting all four wheels to land at the same time, the better. One thing you want to try to avoid if possible is landing on the throttle. I hear a lot of people say online and other places that never land on the throttle, but quite frankly that's kind of hard because many times the truck wants to go nose heavy. It's a little bit of a toss-up whether it's better to land on the throttle or nosedive, but to me I'd rather usually try to land on the tires if I can, and that requires a last-minute throttle correction. So I think the goal is just to try not to land on the throttle hard if you can help it, and if you don't need to hit the throttle when you land, don't, because that's where you end up breaking diffs. One of the more important things to know about jumping an RC car is that you can actually control it in the air. That's done either through using the throttle or the brake on the controller. Unless it's a very steep ramp, the nose is going to want to dive down. So you're going to want to use the throttle to keep that nose up. Typically when you're approaching a ramp, you're going to be on the throttle anyway, so punching it a little more is going to only help you to keep the nose up. Oftentimes the truck will want to backflip on you if you punch it hard enough on the ramp or the ramp steep enough, and that's okay. You can just let it backflip. So if you're jumping and the truck is like this, you can use the brake, just a slight tap on the brake to stop the wheels from moving and it'll level it out, or if you go too much it's going to lower it. An overcorrection on the brake means a hard nosedive, or a overcorrection on the throttle can be to slam the back end of the truck down. So it takes a lot of finesse and skill to kind of dial it in, and really that boils down to practice. The risk being that you're going to break the truck many times as you do this. It's pretty much guaranteed, but that's all part of the practice. You're going to learn how to fix the truck the more you break it, and you're going to learn how to jump the more you practice. So speaking of air control, there's a couple other things to point out. One is that if you have AVC on your vehicle, which stands for active vehicle control, that also can control the side-to-side movement of the truck. And that's because when it's turned on and the vehicle turns this way, it's going to compensate with the tires to turn the opposite direction. And that can help some people learn the technique and kind of keep the vehicle in control. I do not like it, nor do I recommend it, so I have it off on my trucks. At least in my opinion, it's better to learn on a manual, sort of analog basis without these computer-assisted aspects of it, because that way you're going to learn really the feel of the truck and everything you need to do to control it in the air. So another factor to consider when talking about air control is the truck you're using. So this Kraton is great with air control. Something like this Typhon, for example, is not. So if you take off the jump at the right angle, you can sort of let this float and land accordingly. If you're nosediving with this, it's going to be a lot harder to pull up. And part of that is because of these smaller circumference tires. That's another point to consider. The bigger the tire, the more air control you're going to have. These Copperhead 2s that come on most Kratons today are a really big, beefy tire, great for air control. There's even bigger ones like the Magmas. Massive tires, and they're heavy. Those really can flip easily in the air. That centrifugal force of the bigger tire just gives you more and more air control, particularly on the throttle and brake. So size of the tire has a lot to do with it, as does length of the truck. So something like this big Mojave is going to have a harder time being controlled in the air. This thing is notorious for nosediving for me. You cannot pull the nose up on this thing. And no matter how much I punch it in the air, sometimes if I'm going too fast and I don't have much more room to add throttle to it, it just pile drives right into the ground. This happens to have paddle tires on it right now, but the tires that come with it, like this, are not much bigger. In fact, they may be smaller, and same idea. Much smaller than the Kraton tires here, and they just really don't give you the movement in the air to do much of a difference. So this thing's got sort of two things against it: small tires and long, big body. And that's why this is much more of a ground control truck for me. Not as fun to do flips or tricks with in the air, like something like the Kraton or the notorious Kagama, things like that. One of the things that I had to learn simply through practice was how to not panic in the air. If you're on a BMX bike, a dirt bike, there's a tendency to sort of panic when you're in mid-flight and not sure what to do next. That especially is true if the vehicle is taking off at a bad angle or something's not quite going right in the air. Oof. Oftentimes, allowing momentum that you already have to just be can be the perfect solution that you need. If you're going off of a jump and the truck is naturally backflipping, sometimes the best bet is to not touch anything. Just allow it to do its rotation. You may need a little correction if needed, but oftentimes it'll just do its thing and you can land nice and smoothly by just coasting it out. Other times you're going to need to correct, but when you do, you're going to have to do very subtle taps. No hard pulls in either direction. One way to assist with not overcorrecting is to make sure your brake and throttle settings are not too high. So for the throttle, something like setting the punch too high or the travel too high can cause your little correction to be overstated. The brake, though, is even more important. This is often a trouble spot for me and many people. With the throttle, the truck's already moving very fast when you go off the jump, so there's not a lot of room to add more. With the brake, however, you've got plenty of room. So a simple touch on the brake can easily point the nose far down. Jesus. Yikes. And especially if you've got your brake setting too high. So be sure you go and adjust that down. The downside of course of that is that when you're driving on flat ground or racing around, you can't stop as easily. So those of you who have big heavy trucks like this, or even bigger with the fifth scales, you got to kind of find that balance. As I've said in other videos, I find this particularly hard when I switch trucks, because all of my trucks are set up kind of differently. So I'll get it all dialed in for this truck, for example, where I can know just how to touch the brake and the throttle and correct things in the air. And then I'll go drive the Kagama and pile drive it into the ground because the brake is a little different, the truck is a little different. So those of you who have different trucks, be sure to work your way into each truck so you're not breaking it after the first couple of jumps. Now you may think jumping higher is more problematic, and it can be if you land wrong, but counterintuitively, sometimes jumping higher is exactly what you need. This is, of course, after you've gotten the basics down. Once you jump higher, you get more time in the air to correct. Slow and fast jumps, some of those are the hardest, where you're going full speed and you sort of skim across the ground jumping. You get very little room for error, and you can easily tumble when you land. All right, let's get out there and try some of these techniques and see how they go. So guys, it's worth noting that when you do this kind of jumping, especially when you're new to it, that you really need to be careful, have safety in mind. At this level, these are very heavy, very fast vehicles, and if you don't know how to jump super well, that's a time where bad things can happen. So know where you're jumping and be able to see ahead of you. When you first start out, be very sure you're not going to hit yourself or anyone else. So that's my disclaimer. Every time I come here, it's windy. Something about this area. It'll be perfectly fine at my house, and then I get here and it's windy. I don't know. So hopefully the wind noise isn't too bad, but I'll just start off on the flat here and kind of just show you some basics. Using my trusty EXB. So when starting out, a lot of people prefer to stand back behind the jump and hit it directly head on. This allows you to not have to get so much depth perception and angle judging, and you know just how to hit the ramp. So you can see I'm literally not touching the brake or the throttle after I jump on these, just kind of letting it coast. I don't like to go directly on the side because then it's hard to see the angle. I like to, if I'm gonna do it, be behind the jump, but not directly behind it, kind of at an angle like this. This is my actually preferred spot. Now that I ever so slightly tapped the brake because it was starting to get a little high on the nose. Very subtly tap the brake. Again there, see, just subtle. If I had hit it too hard, I would have been nose heavy. If I wouldn't have hit it at all, I would have landed on the rear end. So you can just get a little more confident, a little more speed, and you just keep on going like that. All right, so you're starting to see, this is practice, 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 practice. Now when I put it over on this hill, it gives it a lot more height. And that's where you have more room to play, do backflips and all sorts of big, huge air. So let's see if I can do a backflip just on this little flat ground here. Okay, I landed good, but it bounced. So with that flip, I definitely had to hit the brake in the air to make it land as flat as possible. Oop, so I didn't give it enough brake there. If I was a little easier on it and let the truck naturally rotate, I probably wouldn't need the brake. Perfect. Cannot seem to land on my wheels after a tumble here. So I think now it's time to switch it to the hill so we can get a little more height. Let's just try a regular jump, no flip. Oh, so I got a little, started to panic there in the air. You can see pull up, pull down, pull up, pull down, but because they were very small movements and because I have the brake and throttle not too high, I was able to not get too wild there. Alright, so a quick brake in the air and just let it coast down. See, no more corrections after that, none needed. So as you can see, I like to stand at an angle, in front of the jump, but at an angle. You get enough speed. Okay, so you see I just tapped the brake and then let it coast all the way down on all four wheels. Is exactly what you want. It's important to have enough speed on the approach though. So I'm about, let's see, 1/2 to 3/4 throttle and then punch it. I punch it right at the end, full throttle. I don't go full throttle all the way up into the ramp usually, because then you don't have a lot of room to pull up if needed. So now let's do a little more freestyle action. Whoa, heard that. I don't know if that was the tire or the diff. Good going. So let's try the EXB. Same thing. Okay, nice and smooth.